Welcome to the Excellence at Work podcast, where we explore the strategies and best practices that drive business success. I'm Rochelle Cook, COO of Brandon Hall Group and the host of our podcast, along with members of our executive team. In each episode, we'll dive into the latest trends, insights, and real-world examples from some of the most exciting leaders from organizations worldwide. Be part of our journey and learn from the best as we discuss innovative approaches and cutting-edge technologies for talent management, learning and development, leadership, diversity and inclusion, and more.
Hi, everyone. This is Michael Rochelle, Chief Strategy Officer, Principal Analyst here at the Brandon Hall Group. This is another Excellence at Work podcast. Always excited to have the best and the most informative discussions with top leaders and thought leaders around the world to talk about what's happening. And so I'm honored to have on one of our regulars. Bob is going to join us and talk to us about what is that promise in AI for learning and development. Bob's got a very extensive background and level of experience. I'm going to let him introduce himself, but this is a person that we really want to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Yeah, so Bob Szostak with V2X Professional Services, VPS. Been in the industry for about 28 years now. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go through with things, but thought this would be a great time to have a conversation as we're more than a few years into the AI revolution and take a look at what the promises are, what's working, and maybe where do we go from here.
Excellent. Okay, so there's been a lot of discussion, Bob, around AI and learning and development. And I think there's been fair to say that there's been extremes in where people are coming out on the utilization of AI and, quite frankly, its interaction with people in the process. Also, I think there's been a lot talked about as far as how to choose technology providers now because they all have AI, and am I in a position to evaluate that properly? Got processes that could be transformed through AI. You have people thinking about, do I need to be upskilled and reskilled within the learning organization? Is this gone beyond just content development and the LMs that we saw like a couple of years ago when this whole thing really started to take off? Lots of discussion, as you know, too. It's a microcosm of where organizations are in general about how they feel about AI governance. Are we ready to do this? Data privacy issues, all the things that are important. So you've really, and I know because you're just a great, fair, balanced person. You know, you and your organization have continuously cautioned organizations to be patient when it comes to new innovations like AI. And I know it sounds like an obvious question, but, why is that?
Yeah, so, Michael, we've been together a long time. You and I working together. And, look, I started my career when web-based training was a new innovation, right? Just going back to that type of cycle of innovation, the thoughts on how it would change the world. And, and thinking about this discussion with you, I thought about 2010s and when we're all going to have the wearable computing and the glasses that had all the instructions up in our, upper left quadrant of our eyepieces. And nowadays our avatars are supposed to be having these conversations with each other. No one would know the difference. And of each cycle, there's things that come along. There's a lot of promise and there's a lot of good things that come, but it takes time to mature. And it's not to discourage folks from being early adopters necessarily. It's to encourage folks to be conscious of their responsibility as stewards of their organization. And their budgets and the outcomes, not just when it comes to the learning technology, but the learning results. Let's talk about AI just for a second in that context. I mentioned those other things are a little bit dated. When we don't have to go back far in time to look at the promises of AI and how rapidly things are changing, because of the growth nature and the hyper growth nature of the capabilities that it's spawning. If we just go back even a few years and look at the promise of AI and the things it's supposed to do for us. And 3 years ago, one of the primary focuses was about the democratization of development and putting everybody on a level playing field and being able to do it faster and quicker, and that was one of the areas of focus. And that came true to a large extent. But the unintended consequence of that was flooding the market with generic content, right? And what organizations found over time, and we're seeing in our research, and perhaps you have as well, is we're still missing the fundamental pieces that tie the learning that folks are taking to the actual business objectives and job performance. That AI doesn't necessarily take that larger step. It's great at generic content, but when we get to what we call the hyperhuman aspects of performance and critical decision making, empathy, leadership, things in those areas, it's not the replacement yet, for those areas. You always have to say yet when you're looking at things. If we look again at technology, even just what we were talking about with AI a couple years ago, all the conversations we were having were about ChatGPT and how ChatGPT is going to change the world, right? And we've seen whether it's ChatGPT or some other platforms, and that absolutely have its place. But ChatGPT has been surpassed and supplanted by agentic AI, to a large degree. So it's no longer having access to information, but having information come to you because it's embedded in the workflow and actually reading the context of what you're doing for if you're a call center agent or something like that to give you advice in real time. So it's not a matter of not dabbling or not playing. It's just being careful about going all in too soon, if that makes sense.
A kind of a follow-up to that is, do you think that people think using it beyond developing content is a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. And we use it in a lot of different ways for scheduling, for instance, and resolving complex conflicts within larger programs that we implement. It absolutely is a good thing, but what we can't take away is the human in the loop aspect of it, or the importance of subject matter experts. And in this case, not just from a technical standpoint, but from learning and development as well. And that was a caution from day one of AI, and it's one of the things that's really proven to be true over time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think when you look at the evolution of AI, I think particularly in the area of learning and development, I think it was one of the quickest uptakes because it was easy, right? It's like, wow, I don't have to start with a blank piece of paper. Or, I don't have to be staring at my authoring tool, thinking from scratch how to develop something. I can repurpose much quicker. I could take something and just take an idea and tell it to make it look like this. Like the promise was there. And also, I'm sure you agree that it seemed like it was the best blend of AI and HI. Like it was the perfect tandem of a person and AI working together, like leveraging the strengths of both. But I think it's gotten fuzzier beyond that.
Yeah.
When you start to look at the use of AI in learning and development, the other areas, whether it's analytics or improving the learner experience or AI coaching
Mhm.
or all these other things, like I think that's where it gets murkier for people, right? Because they're like, okay, I don't necessarily see the synergy, or I think people are better than that at AI, and it becomes, I think, more difficult for learning and development to start to look at those other areas. Like, would you trust AI analytics when you might say, our learning data, I don't know how good it is in the first place. If it's pulling from that, I don't know if I would agree with the insight that AI would develop. So I think you're right and valid in the fact that we need to be cautious. We need to think this through because every step requires a people, process, tech, or governance approach to all of it.
Yeah, and even to that point, Michael, I mean, it's a great point of, if you look at the things that haven't changed over the past few years, still more than half the organizations out there are citing concerns about the security
That's
of
right.
AI, right? Or the hallucination accuracy of
Hmm.
AI systems. Over 50% of organizations that are using it have those concerns, and they're good, they're valid. To your point, just like everything else, we're going to have a new technology. We're going to push it as far as we can go before we have to pull back to what really can and should be done with it.
Yeah. And to add to your point, I think the what and should be done, that's pure governance, right? People, we have a choice, and our research backs up exactly what you said, that, one out of two organizations are still thinking this all out. And one of their key factors for either an obstacle challenge or a gate, depending on how you want to think about it, is the governance. Is literally sitting down and saying, we could bring this in tomorrow, but do we have the who, what, when, where, why, kind of figured out? Like, how do we feel about all this? Who's going to have access to it, and what data we're going to use or how we're going to go about. So I agree with you. I don't think people are against AI in learning and development. They just want to think it out before they open the front door and bring it into the building, so to speak.
So smart for sure.
So there's been a lot of hits and misses, with that evolution of beyond content development and promises to learning and development when it comes to AI. What do you think of those high profile hits and misses that we've seen so far?
Yeah, as I think about it, I think that the hits and misses are really in the same area. Some of the ones that I'd highlight. So
Hmm.
absolutely has it democratized and made learning development accessible to more people and allowed organizations to be more productive. Absolutely. It's been a big hit in bringing down cost and cycle time in developing more generic content. That's absolutely a hit. But the other side of that I alluded to earlier is the what we call the hyperhuman skills, right? I mentioned that before. That the miss that we've found is that some things are still better done by human beings, still better taught in live interactions that cannot be as well emulated or taken by AI as they can with real people. We're getting there. I mean, for some road interactions and, tracking a customer service call and role playing, fantastic. But for things like storytelling, which is such an important part of conveying business lessons and your value. Things like emotional intelligence, leadership. I mentioned that before. Those things are still beyond the promise of AI. And it's not to say there's not some good aspects that are being done in AI because there's very specific use cases. But what we're seeing is those hyperhuman skills really becoming the human capital of learning enterprises now, and the differentiators that take them beyond just their ability to employ technical solutions.
Do you think, I mean, all great points. Do you think one of the other misses is that, do you think providers might have been overly enthusiastic about the promise of AI in their platforms?
Yeah, to a degree, right? I mean, we as a provider and a provider of a lot of different learning services live in a very fragmented sphere or landscape of providers looking at opportunities. And what we've seen in the past few years and what AI has enabled is a proliferation of very use case specific learning providers that
Hmm.
have platforms, that have solutions, and they're good for what they do. They're great for what they do. But they're not the panacea. There is no panacea, right, to an organization's learning problems unless you're making one type of widget over and over again, then maybe one solution will fit you. But yeah, I think it was oversold, overhyped, on the vendor side, if you will, of how, sign up here and it'll solve all your problems type of thing. And look, at the end of the day, we're dealing with complex human beings that work in complex organizations that have stakeholders in work in dynamic environments. There has to be human intelligence in a loop.
Yeah, and that's a great thing to kind of riff on for a little bit is, in our research, we found that there's like three categories for people. There's
Yeah.
humans out of the loop, there's humans in the loop, and now there's this human on the loop, right?
Yeah.
And don't you think it seems like overall we've spent more time, particularly for L&D, we spend more time talking about humans out of the loop than humans in the loop or humans on the loop when we talk past content development, when we talk about other areas, it seems too much of like it's a walk away. Like this can do it for you. You don't have to really pay attention to it. The agent will take care of it for you. Do you think that that's been talked about too much of it being a set it and forget it type of technology?
I think it has been talked a little bit about too much in a way, but at the same time, that human in the loop and that caution around maintaining that has been there since day one. But you're right. It's almost like it takes it's a granted. Well, I've got a human managing this. I've got someone overlooking this. It's no, that human has to be involved in the content creation, validation, how this is going to be consumed by actual human beings at the end of the day. And I don't think that has enough attention paid to it overall. There has been kind of that set it and forget it type of mentality. And to be fair, I think industry has kind of furthered that message to some degree.
Another particular miss that's come up, and it's kind of like, I guess, an air quote miss. Love to get your perspective on it, is AI has also been positioned as like a panacea. Like
Yeah.
it can fix things on its own, and like we were talking about earlier, if you have bad data, AI is just going to come up with really smart versions of how to feed back to you the same bad data. Do you think people have lost track of the fact that AI begins and ends with people in learning and development? Like AI requires the inputs from people, and then AI requires the L&D professional to review what it's accomplished or created or churned out. Like it can't fix bad data, or it can't fix bad
Right.
learning, or like, it doesn't operate, 100% autonomously. Do you think that's a miss too, that makes people think that, all I need is AI and it'll be better?
Yeah, to some degree, I absolutely agree with that, Michael. I think, if we talk, I'm just going to add another, another name to the hyperhuman skills out there and call it diversity, right? And what I worry about more in the scenario you described is the natives, the folks that are growing up and entering the industry in this AI enabled world,
Mhm.
right? And you're always at the risk, and I say this at least once every conversation that we have, that I sound like the old guy in the room and whatnot, right? Of going back to the tried and true. But that's where awareness of where the industry has come and what the foundational elements are that are important
Mhm.
learning and development, which is performance, at the end of the day, comes into play, and that there are different ways of doing things. And just because something is easier doesn't mean it's better. So, yeah, I do think we've lost that focus to some degree.
Yeah, I'm glad you agree, because I think it's a focal point that, we used to say, and I think it's great that you said it's always been there. Like AI is just another version of the same thing. Like, so now we have AI analytics,
Yeah.
but as you pointed out earlier, if you haven't built outcome-based learning with thought, and like, how would we measure the progress of it? AI doesn't fix the way you built learning. I was doing a keynote not too long ago where I said, like, you probably don't have a measurement problem. You probably have a learning problem. Like, you're not building your learning to
Mhm.
be measurable. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think people, or at least maybe the first wave, maybe people are getting much more tuned into this, that it's not like one of those, like those new things. I think they're great. Like those things that you can get where they're like little white sponges and you can wipe it, it
Like
makes
your
it,
magic eraser.
yeah, the magic
Yeah.
eraser. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
like automatically fix things for you.
Right.
So, but one follow-up question to it is, have you seen, with all these hit and misses, have you seen tremendous impact on the learning teams themselves? Like you do learning services, so you're there. I mean, your core piece, your UVP is helping the learning organization people themselves to be more productive or more scalable or more efficient or reduce friction. Have you found that people have been asking you a lot about how AI can play into that because you are experts in the field?
Absolutely. Absolutely, they have been, right? And we see that in a number of different ways. And we see that in the types of requests that are hitting industry, as well. Because again, from a basic content development, from a generic content development perspective, that's something that organizations are equipped to handle very well on their own today. Doesn't mean they can't benefit from going to an outsourcer, but things that require that are more accustomed to the goals of their organization or the discriminators and whatnot, those are usually the things now they're coming to us for because AI cannot satisfy them,
Right.
to the same extent. So it absolutely affects the types of conversations and requests that we're seeing.
And I mean, I know this sounds like a 1 foot level question, but have you seen people really say I've transformed my training needs analysis with AI?
I've seen people make the claim.
Okay.
Yes, I've seen how AI can help facilitate analysis and data parsing, and in that area. But again, you have to have the right data collected to be able to do that. But no, I haven't seen a flip a switch solution yet that's going to take care of all that. Yeah,
Right, right. Because logically, people built the learning strategy that the TNA
yeah,
is based on.
yeah.
And unless they're feeding in the business conditions that would have an impact, AI isn't just going to, AI might wake up and say in a vacuum, you could say it, based on what the thing you gave me, you could say it a little different, or you might want to
Right.
add these points, but it's not going to go running down the hallway and pull your learning committee together and say, hey, I'd just like to have a meeting with you about your learning strategy because I've been asked to upgrade your training needs analysis. And it just
Does
brings up
does
that
a great
really, yeah.
does a great job augmenting. Does not replace in any way, shape. Yeah.
So kind of like thinking about the like horizon. You and I always talk about horizon
Yeah.
stuff, right? you're looking at, and let's just say AI is everything we said it was and everything we didn't get a chance to say it was. But if you're looking at AI or implementing AI, everyone on a podcast wants to be like, okay, this is really great information, but what are the two or three most important things I should take away from this? When you're talking to an organization, a learning and development organization about evaluating AI, what do you say as the top two or three most important criteria that an L&D organization should pay attention to when it comes to considering AI use or implementation?
Yeah, so let's move beyond the cosmetic or the simple things like developing basic courseware, right? I mean, that's a given nowadays. I think the number one thing that organizations need to focus on is incorporating AI into their outcomes, into their organizational data. So we want the AI-driven ROI, right? It should be planned to measure, improve the aspects of performance that you are measuring as success outcomes, not just getting more learning quicker. Is it making a difference and how do you know? So it's the smart use of it, right? And creating ROI for an organization around their learning objectives, their business objectives, if you will. That would be the first thing. The second thing is that talk to folks about building their learning organization. I'm really going to go back and focus on those hyperhuman skills. That becomes the capital of your organization. That cannot be replaced by AI. Is building the capability to teach critical decision making, empathy, leadership skills, even the type of knowledge of how and when to use AI in your learning organization. Those aren't going to go away, and it's easy to say they're not going to go away in 10 years from now. I made them go away. Okay, great. But for how we're looking at things and what's endured the first wave, for sure, that's where I'd encourage people to invest.
So basically is put your thinking cap on and really try to figure out what you want to do with all of this.
There you go. Yeah.
I love that because it's very empowering. I think a lot of people, L&D professionals, feel like AI might have gotten away from them. They're either in a role of playing catch up or upskilling or reskilling or having to go on the internet and read about it, or like they just feel like they're behind.
Sure.
What I love about what you're saying is you're not, because you still have the power of choice, and that power of choice allows you to be able to say, how do I feel about it? Doesn't matter how far AI has gone.
Yeah.
I can sit down. I'm still in control of where would we use it, who would use it, under what conditions. It's still choice. And, do I want to continue working with my current providers or not, AI or not? Like everything's still a choice. You're not getting, ramrodded into doing something that you don't want to do. And I think that's a very powerful statement to make.
Very good. Appreciate that.
Well, another whirlwind station. We could talk about this for hours, right?
And we probably will again. Yeah.
We probably will again. But it's always a pleasure having you on. Great insights, very practical, down to earth. You talk to literally hundreds and hundreds of organizations. I think you made it simple for folks. I think you made it, a little more tangible for what L&D professionals need to think about. So I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Michael. Always appreciate the opportunity to work with you and the Brandon Hall Group. So thank you.
Well, this is Michael Rochelle, Chief Strategy Officer and Principal Analyst at the Brandon Hall Group. We appreciate you joining this Excellence at Work podcast. Thanks to Bob. Thanks to VPS. Look forward to having another podcast with you soon, Bob.
All right. Thanks, Michael. Cheers.